We're going to get into the weeds on recruiting, which is what we do here on the BWI Live Recruiting Show. It's a big day for news. Penn State has been getting, I think, the things other than commitments they want to know, which is when are the decisions going to happen? Dominoes are going to start to fall, and we're going to be tracking the whole thing. Also coming up on today's show, we've got another Under Armour camp, this time in Baltimore. Ryan Snyder is going to be helping us preview that. We're going to be going through some of the things that Sean Fitz has learned in the last week or so with Penn State football recruiting. And, of course, new names added to the official visit list for June. As much as this weekend is important, and we'll get into the official visitors this weekend, June is the biggest month in Penn State football recruiting, I'd say, at this point, with the number of top players that are deciding between Penn State and their top schools, and then the players that are visiting that still have to make their decision, largely coming in June, which starts, what's that? Tomorrow?
Sunday.
Saturday. Sunday. Don't know the difference between 31st and the 1st. Sunday.
That's cool. I have no idea what today is based on.
I only know that because I've been writing official visit weekend, May 30th to June 1st for like 4 months now. That's the only reason I know that.
Well, Ryan is back, and so is his voice. Ryan, what's going on with you this week? And kind of like, before we get into all those things I just outlined, what's important to you this week for Penn State football recruiting? What's at the top of your mind?
Yeah, well, first off, shout out to Little League for not allowing us to play on Memorial Day weekend, so I don't got to yell at Johnny to get the hell out of the sand, so I have my voice back. That's good. As far as what is going on this weekend, there's a ton. We got a camp in State College. Boys, help me cover that so I can go to Baltimore and track all these 2027 and 2028s. Got a big official visit weekend, of course, right? I mean, it's mainly the commits this weekend. I think, 4 or 5. We'll see what the number ends up being. We're going to track that down a little bit later today. But right now, 4 or 5 probably uncommitted guys. And then, we're in full game mode as far as official visit season goes. So the next 2 weeks, obviously, are the big ones, I would say, as far as uncommitted guys, things moving. But when we look at the guys who are coming this weekend, I don't know if we're going to have a commitment right away. And Marlon Bright, circle, who says he's going to commit later in the year, but I think he's going to come to Penn State. So we'll see if that pops now or later. But other than that, I mean, there's certainly some guys here that I think are serious about Penn State. Will probably end up at Penn State, whether it's this weekend or weeks down the road. Time will tell.
Fitz, welcome to the show. Any other thoughts you want to add to the start before we dive into some of the news and names we're going to be talking about to start?
Hey, we always love surprises too. We won't rule out any of those surprises. Mm-hmm. I will say I do like, being right and then finding out that I'm right. Once again, this visit list, which was a huge committed list, but also like 8 uncommitted visitors, cut in half, just like the one in the first half or the first big weekend of the year. We told you that they weren't going to hold up. I mean, it was one of those things where they were all scheduling visits and everything would look pretty in February and March, and you get to the official visit season and kind of whittle it down even more. So that visit list, half of what it was last week. And we reported that on BlueWireIllustrated.com at the end of last week. I mean, it's crunch time, really. I mean, you're looking at camps coming in, you're looking at these visitors coming in. And as we said on the show earlier this week, it's kind of a peer recruiting weekend, but not really. Like, that's not the intention of bringing all the commits on at one time. So it's going to be a fascinating couple of weeks, as T. Frank said, like probably the most important 6-week stretch on the calendar, on the recruiting calendar, at least, because things will be fun.
Well, let's kick off the show by talking about some of that recruiting news that came out over the last couple of days with decision announcements from, let's call it 4 of Penn State's top targets, at least that we have here. And we'll bring this up from Khary Adams, Dorian Barney, Messiah Hampton, Luke Wafel, all talking to On3 at various times over the last week or so, and announcing their commitment dates. Khary Adams, June 28th, Dorian Barney, July 5th, Messiah Hampton, June 13th, and Luke Wafel gave a rough time of late June, early July, which tracks to the end of his official visits. So off the bat, I'm going to ask the dumb question just to get the ball rolling here. Fitz, does this change anything now that we have dates in terms of which way you think these guys might be leaning? Does that help you inform at all the thought process for any of these top targets?
Yeah, I mean, it cuts off any officials that they have scheduled after those visits, which is none of them. So no, it doesn't really help in that matter. Chad Simmons stopped by and talked to Khary Adams, and he said a lot without really, or he didn't say a lot while saying a lot. You know what I mean? It's part of that time of year when they're waiting too. Like, I know fans are waiting for these official visits to take place. Fans are waiting for things to happen. But these prospects, there's only so many schools you can visit in a certain time period. So they're waiting for all this stuff to happen too. There's obviously negotiations to be had and things of that nature. So it's not, I mean, we're kind of in purgatory right now. I mean, you look, yes, Penn State had their first official visit weekend a few weeks ago, but as with Khary Adams, as with Joey O'Brien, those guys that were in, Penn State just kind of holding onto the rope right now. You know, you feel like you're in a great spot with those guys, but there's a lot ahead of them. So there's visits coming up. Khary Adams is going to take a couple of more. I think he's going to see Ryan on Sunday. I mean, that's the most important visit for his summer, I'm sure, at Baltimore Under Armour, supposedly. But that's what we got cooking. But no, it really doesn't change much. I mean, you think about how this has progressed since the summer official visits came into play, and you think, actually, I think back to the class of 2022. I mean, this is really where this took off in terms of guys coming to visit, get their 3 or 4 visits in during June, and then all of a sudden, the beginning of July is just it's just a cluster because there's so many things happening. I think there was one July 4th, Penn State got 3 commits. Is that right, Ryan? Was that the Caleb Artis day, or you know,
wasn't it 4? I think it was 4 where they had I
just remember it sucked.
Commit.
It was a terrible July 4th.
Ryan and I were cranking out a lot of videos, and 4 guys committed, 3 guys stayed committed to Penn State during that one weekend.
Yeah, I mean, you got a lot going on there. So these next 6 weeks, it's just going to be progressive toward the end of that little window where a lot of these decisions will come. So in short, no. Short answer.
I got to look this up now. I forget which year it was. I think 2023.
2020. It was 2022. I can tell you, it was. I think it might have been our first year doing this, like doing these things together, because it was like a baptism by fire for me. It had left a strong impression that particular weekend. Ryan, any other thoughts from you on kind of the names and dates and getting any inkling or insight into what these guys are thinking?
Yes, it was Keon Wiley, Zane Durant, Caleb Artis. That's it. So 3. And then there was another one 2 days later, which is by the way, Nick Singleton. He was July 6th. Anyway, as far as the dates goes, not a shocker. I think Messiah Hampton, June 13th, makes a lot of sense. We've been thinking Oregon for a while. Oregon's right before that visit, right, Sean? I believe.
Yes.
I don't have his profile up. Yeah, he's going to go to Oregon.
To Syracuse this weekend, I believe, and Oregon. And those are the 3 main ones. I know he's got a top 7, but Syracuse, Penn State, and Oregon. But I think Oregon's the way to go.
I think, Ross Douglas has ties with his agents or whomever that group is up there with Rochester. I don't know them too well, but I think those ties. Ross Douglas was the wide receiver coach at Syracuse, went to Oregon. I think when he went to Oregon, which is a much more prominent program than Syracuse, and those ties, and also financially what can be provided there, I think that was kind of how that one played out. So no shocker there with Messiah Hampton. Dorian Barney, I think it doesn't surprise me, July 5th, which, by the way, July 5th setting up to be, I think, Brandon Arrington, Dorian Barney, Marlon Bright. So T. Frank, put that on your calendar. But
I'm off that day.
Yeah.
I have a Phillies game on July 4th. Fortunately, it's the 4th, actually. We'll talk about that later. The thing I'd say with Dorian Barney is I think Penn State felt really good coming out of a visit, and the whole talk was like, he's close. He's really close. But he didn't. He's going to take all these visits, which I'm not surprised about. I mean, he kind of was leaning that way, but at the same time, there was an inkling of like, man, just a little bit of a nudge, and maybe it could be over. Well, with the July 5th commitment date, it certainly leans like he's going to take all those visits. And, right now I certainly believe Penn State's the favorite, but as we said, I think on the podcast and in different notebooks, like he was really close to committing to Texas A&M twice too and didn't, right? Yeah. So this is probably going to drag out certainly going to drag out a few more weeks as long as he sticks with that. Or I think if you're Penn State, you kind of want it to go to July 5th now, because if you commit sooner, it's probably going to be after a visit to Texas A&M or something like that. But certainly, I think Penn State feels good. They're in a good spot there. It's just we're going to have to wait probably a month or so to figure that out. And Khary Adams, I mean, June 28th makes a lot of sense. It just feels like it's Notre Dame, Penn State, and the fact that he wants to not drag this out forever seems like he feels pretty confident in those 2 schools.
Oregon's in there as well. You can't ever write them off. I mean, it's just one of those things.
That's fair.
And we've compared him to Brandon Finney so much that I think people have conflated the 2 recruitments. Like,
that's a good point.
It's the same type of recruitment. It's different kid, different situation. So like that's the only thing that I would wedge myself in there and say is just like, yes, Oregon's definitely still in the mix here, but just because we've compared him to Brandon Finney doesn't mean it's going to turn out the same way.
Yeah, and he is going to Oregon last too, which will be, I guess a week or so before he potentially commits. So
how unpredictable or predictable do you feel like the next 6 weeks are? Fitz, you mentioned surprises. We like surprises. Ryan, you kind of gave an outline of what you're expecting from these guys. How do you feel about, like, because there's the conversation in the chat right now about NIL and the influence, all these things. Fitz has mentioned that already. Is there a certain maybe leveling off of, we understand a little bit better now about how these things are going to go now that we've been through the car wash a couple times, or is this setting up to be unpredictable where Penn State could boom or bust in the next couple of weeks? Ryan,
you or me, Sean? So this is the easy answer. I feel like I always come back to. That's a very black and white way to look at it. It's much more gray than that. If you look at the individual players, I can point out a lot of guys that I think are going to come to Penn State, and it's just a matter of time. I've said that just about Marlon Bright a few minutes ago. There's plenty of others as well. But at the same time, NIL and those discussions, which, let's be honest, I mean, there's quite a few prominent players right now that haven't really even discussed money with Penn State. And that's really all these schools, because these schools don't want to be the ones that first bring up the money, because whatever number you lay down first is going to guarantee to get outbid, right? So those kind of discussions really kind of wait until the end, especially for prominent players. You're talking 5-star guys like Carter Meadows and Luke Wafels of the world, all those kind of guys. So from that perspective, it is unpredictable, because you don't know. All it takes is one school.
Yeah, right. That's more of what I'm asking about in terms of we're kind of the view of these players that we're outlining here with Luke Wafel, Khary Adams, top players in the class that are in that discussion, where that is a part of an element with the recruiting from other schools as well. So that's why I was curious about it. If you feel like go for
it. There's still prospects that will not take the top dollar amount and find what's out there that they actually want to be in, like that there's still that element. Like, I think we want to jump into it and say it's all money, and it's not necessarily the case. Money's important, because it should be, because these guys are having an opportunity to play football for money, essentially. I mean, it's not pay for play, but okay. But you've got a situation here where you're trying to balance where you're going to spend the next couple of years of your life, and it is like free agency, but also at the same time, like there's that aspect of comfort. There's that aspect of family, like that has really helped Penn State in some of these battles. I mean, you look at the prominent guys in Penn State's class, and a guy like Kevin Brown did not discuss money with Penn State before he committed. I'm sure he's going to command, like in command, I say, like market value more so than like demanding. But you've got an opportunity to really, really stretch what you've got and make things happen with these elite guys. It's just not all money, though. I'll say that. Yeah, and I guess that's it's going to be interesting to see, as you guys mentioned, if a team gets desperate where they feel like some of their top targets are off the board and one team needs to make a splash, how that affects the dominoes through all of this. And I'm excited to, from this perspective, hear your reporting on it here on the show, and of course at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Great time to remind you that this is just one percentage of what we do at Blue White Illustrated. If you're checking this out, if you're catching this video here for the first time, got people that haven't been here in a while in the live show, you can subscribe and get this information on a daily basis. The news feed is less like a drip and more like a garden hose of information from Ryan Snyder and Sean Fitz. You subscribe for just $1 for the first week, and you can decide if you want to join us for a year after that. Of course, I'm always pretty confident that when you sign up for that $1, you're probably going to keep going, because the information is great, the conversation, the insight, all those things, especially on the message board. You get the full force of what's going on in Penn State football recruiting, which at this time of year is absolutely essential for you to be keeping up with, to know, what we're talking about, the context for some of these things here on the show. Because again, we're a quarter of the way through and we haven't gotten to our main topics yet today. The conversation is just a little piece of what we're doing. Of course, a part of what we do here on the show is our sponsor for today's show, My Perfect Franchise. Andy Ludicky at My Perfect Franchise is a longtime sponsor here on the BWI Live show. Here's what I know about the economy. Things go up and things go down. Things happen, and then my 401k reacts to that, and I don't pay attention to it because that's what you're supposed to do. If you want more business advice from somebody and you want to change your future beyond just saving for retirement, maybe you've got enough money and you've got enough liquid assets that you can invest in a franchise. Andy Ludicky is a franchise consultant who has years of experience placing people
with the right franchise to manage, not just a franchise. He's not just trying to get you into any situation. He's trying to get you into the right situation so you can succeed. He's built his reputation on making success stories happen as best he can because he's been through the ringer. He's done all of this before. He's bought multiple businesses. He's bought into multiple companies. He's had successes. He's had to sell things. He's learned bumps and bruises along the way, and he wants to share that information with you. His services are 100% free to you. So if you go and you talk to him and you sign up and you want to get some information about what this process is like, you can check him out, Andy at myperfectfranchise.net or 404-973-9901. Andy at myperfectfranchise.net to get on his calendar. He's got all the latest information on businesses and franchises and all those things. You know, that's his expertise, and he'll tell you all about that. Also, a sponsor here on the Thursday show is the Happy Valley Brew Fest, coming back to State College in 2025. Last year was at the stadium. This year they're having a parking lot party because the stadium's under renovation. I don't know if you know that or not, but it's a pretty big deal going on for Penn State in the stadium. So they're going to be in the Porter North lot, which is right across from the stadium. And of course, you're going to have use the facilities of Medler Field. So you get to go have a parking lot party, but you don't have to use a porta-john. So check it out. It's going to be July 19th, 2025. I wouldn't be telling you about it if it's 2026, by the way. 75 breweries from Pennsylvania and beyond. Tons of places that have Penn State connections. So if you're looking for a nice weekend to come into State College that isn't Arts Fest weekend where it's overloaded with people, which you should come anyway. But this is going to be a great opportunity for you to come and hang out and experience some of the best brewers in Pennsylvania and beyond. Fitz, I know you really like the VIP hour with the small batch stuff they do with some of these brewers, right?
Yeah, if you're coming out to a specialty beer fest, you want to get the specialist of the specials, if you will. Yes, the VIP is an hour-long session where you come in. You a lot of the brewers will be there, and if you're a real beer person, you can talk to those brewers, and they're happy to. I mean, I think that beer expos are great. I mean, I've gone Great American Beer Festival. I've been to a ton of these, well, not a ton of these things. My reputation has been to a ton of these things, but I've been to a few of these things, and they're great. And some of the best is just talking beer and talking experience. And sometimes you don't even mention the beer. It's just about being around like-minded people and things that people want to be happy. And I think that you find that at a beer fest. Gets happier at the end, but you have a good time the entire time, especially with that VIP hour at the front. So yeah, I do recommend that. Check it out. I know some people that went last year and said that was certainly worth it because a lot of those small batch things are small batch for a reason. They run out. Yeah. So definitely check that out if you get a chance.
I know our friends at Ain't Fragile are going to be there, so we should definitely go say hi, tell them you came from Blue White Illustrated and the BWI Live Show. And more information, happyvalleybrewfest.com. Also for tickets. It's a perfect reason to come back to Happy Valley, revisit your favorite spots. You can watch them tearing down the building over on the mall. Hammond building, I want to say. Yes. Yeah, Hammond building just came down the other day. So if you want to go say goodbye to that, you want to go check out all your favorite spots downtown. It's a great reason to come in for a weekend and hang out in Happy Valley, which is just an awesome place to be. Fitz and I love it here. We live here. Yeah. Let's talk about.
And by the way, Hammond came down as scheduled. It didn't just fall down. It looks like it's been looking like it's about to fall down for about 20 years now, or maybe longer than that. But it was an actual scheduled demolition. So we got to clarify that one.
Yeah, very, very important to make sure everyone knows that things aren't exploding on campus. Things that could explode in a good way is the visit calendar. There are new additions for June. We just talked about some of the guys that have been here that are going to make their decision in June or that are setting their dates. There's still names being added to this list, which I think Penn State fans are going to be very happy to hear about some of these. And Ryan, I want to come to you to discuss the names on this list that you find interesting. So who are the players that are added now to this June official visit list?
Yeah, I wrote about JB Sabaz yesterday. A really good-looking prospect out of North Carolina, which led us down a rabbit hole yesterday, realizing how stacked North Carolina is this year and how bad Bill Belichick is doing in North Carolina. We could do a separate subject on that one day. But long story short here, Abby, Penn State's going to get him on campus June 6th to the 8th. We have him ranked incredibly highly at 0-3. Right now, he's just outside the top 50 overall and the number 6 offensive tackle in the country. Industry rankings haven't quite caught up to that yet. He's a 3-star everywhere else, but that's the fact that On3 has him so highly, he's still a 4-star in those industry rankings, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if he continues to climb. The big thing here, from kind of what I was researching, learning, I talked to his coach the other day, is actually this is one of those ones where Penn State didn't realize how interested he was in Penn State until somewhat kind of recently. I would say, I don't know, I would say 6 to 8 weeks ago. Now, Troutwine did an in-home visit with JB. That was about, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, I want to say, and it went really well. And, long story short, just from what I understand, Bryce Baker was his quarterback last year. Bryce Baker actually spoke really highly of Penn State. He stayed home because of North Carolina ties and, wanting to be a local guy. But Bryce Baker actually kind of played a little bit of a role in JB's interest from what his coach was kind of explaining to me. And, I think a lot of other things, obviously Penn State's development, the way Troutwine has developed offensive linemen played a big part into it. I think academics and things like that, it has his family very interested. But it's just an interesting one because Penn State does such a good job of, and I'm not trying to, this probably sounds like I'm downplaying, their efforts, but they do such a good job usually at casting a wide net and finding guys. And maybe at the end of the day, it was just, they needed to see more from him athletically or whatever it may have been. But this was actually a kid who had Penn State probably in his top 5 long before Penn State kind of realized how interested he was. Fortunately for them, they did a great job of getting on it and capitalizing. And sure enough, they're going to get an official visit over North Carolina, who was originally scheduled for June 6th and 8th. He also swapped out Auburn for Tennessee the following weekend. Ohio State's still very much in the mix. NC State also has an OV, and I believe he's going to South Carolina this weekend. So there's work to be done. I don't want to act like, this is a kid who's always favored at Penn State, loved Penn State, and maybe they didn't quite realize it right away. But the interest there has been stronger, which, again, I just don't hear that often about a kid who's really interested in Penn State and maybe, Penn State didn't realize it or wasn't pursuing him hard enough until they finally did realize it, did research him, did see the evaluation period, all those things that go along with the April-May period. And sure enough, he's moved up quite a bit on Troutwine's board. Now that board is massively big. We'll talk about that. Sure. So
I tried to write about that this morning, trying to write about the character of this 2026 class. And there are so many players left. They still have to take official visits. I was like, we have a starting point, but could go a lot of different ways.
I'm writing about that today, T. Frank, just so you know. So check in a couple hours later from now. We'll have a good little write-up on who to focus on O-line wise. But Shabazz is an interesting one. He looks like a pretty good player and somebody that Troutwine is certainly very interested in.
Yeah, I love his stance, but I love it. I mean, it's very strange, the fact that it's like a wing T stance for an offensive line. You see, I haven't seen that in quite a while. So I think I'm a big fan of watching those highlights. Fitz, is there another guy here that has added recently? I know you wrote about a lot of these guys this week during your trimmings. So who's the guy that Penn State's added to this list through that May evaluation period, or just how it's worked out recently?
Yeah, Titan Davis, defensive lineman from Missouri. This was one that Penn State's been trying to get back. He's actually visited twice, so he's familiar with Penn State. He's visited a lot of schools. Like, he's been all over the place. So the story this spring was, yes, Penn State hopes to get him back on campus. You weren't sure if that was going to happen. Alabama and Michigan are pretty prominent in this recruitment, but Penn State has had Titan Davis at or near the top of their defensive end board for a long, long time. So I think that's an interesting one. And then all of a sudden he turns around and puts out a top 4, and Penn State's in it. So he was at 14 schools. So you're never really sure, especially when you're 1,000 miles away in Pennsylvania, how in you're actually with this kid.
Yeah.
Even Penn State staff was like, yeah, they hoped to get him on campus. It's not really one of those things where they think they're going to get him, but like for him to turn around, make alterations to his schedule. I believe he's added USC as well. But put Penn State in that top 4. I mean, that's a shot, Yeah, like I said, Alabama and Michigan are probably the two to look at heaviest right now. But he's been to Penn State before. He knows what to expect, and now all of a sudden you're getting one of your top targets. In addition to Alexander Haskell, who's committed, Damari Simeon, who's going to be on campus, and all of a sudden that June 6th weekend, Deion Barnes, Greg Gattuso, Andrew Jackson, those guys are going to be just burnout by the end of it, because there's a lot of talent visiting that weekend. Wrote this morning about Tyson Harley from Gonzaga. He's going to be on campus that weekend. That was previously reported, but he came out with the rest of his schedule. And Penn State, you look at that schedule and you say Penn State's got an opportunity to lock that one down too. Of course, a teammate of Carter Meadows at Gonzaga. But yeah, you've got Wafel coming in, Meadows coming in, Tyson Harley coming in. You check that on the site. There's been a bunch of changes to this schedule so far, as I started off the show talking about. But man, that June 6th weekend is absolutely loaded for defensive linemen.
Yeah, Garrett Witherington too from Alabama. He seems to be still pretty high on the board.
I mean, there's so many, like you can make, like Simeon's coming in, you can make arguments for a bunch of those guys. And that's why we say the most action from here on out is going to be offensive, defensive line, because these boards are massive. I mean, we have our 2026 thread for those of you that are on the site, and those of you that aren't, check it out. It's very, very active, and you keep kind of finding new names, even though they're not new names. Johnny Jones from Florida just came out with his top, I believe it was top 6. Penn State's in it. He had an official visit set to Penn State, but it's just like, man, you're just getting hit from all angles with these guys that are interested in Penn State on both sides of the line of scrimmage. So that's been good. UCLA, Ole Miss, Penn State, Florida State, Colorado, and Vanderbilt for Johnny Jones. That's going to be interesting to see how this one shakes out, because not necessarily saying Jones is like the top of the top board guys, but you've got 2 official visitors coming in this weekend on the offensive line. Then you've got Grayson McHugh next weekend. So, I mean, it's going to be very fascinating to see how Phil Troutwine works over the next couple of weeks. So
you guys were in the pocket. I didn't want to interrupt you, but Ryan and I had the same reaction to that Titan Davis video. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, rewind like 2 minutes and go and watch Titan Davis's highlights again, but watch for the quarterback number 5. Ryan here says that QB in the video was a D lineman. I was completely distracted this morning. I wasn't even watching Titan Davis. I just want to know about the 300-pound quarterback that team in Missouri has that they're fielding out there. That was ridiculously funny. So I appreciate Ryan saying the same thing.
They're hard to tackle.
He looked like he moved pretty well too. Like he was a quick dude for being as big as he was.
When I was in high school, we played. So I live right on the border, Pennsylvania, Maryland border, and we go over to Hagerstown and play one of the Hagerstown teams. And South High had a guy named Mike Lee, Mike Lee was taller than me and much, much bigger than me. He's probably about 6'4", 6'5", 300 pounds, and he was in the backfield, and he was very, very large, but very nimble. I've seen him dunk and stuff like that. He's an incredible athlete for that size, but man, that's not something you want to see running toward you.
Absolutely, especially in that option game where you're not full steam ahead. There's a little bit of indecision there. So that was fun. I'm glad that somebody else saw that. So I guess before we get to our final guy here that I have on the list, are you guys optimistic that Penn State can land some of these defensive linemen? Let's talk about defensive tackle in particular, where you still got a board that has Titan Davis, Damari Simeon, and the other guys that you mentioned. Earlier in the chat, somebody wanted to know, why isn't Penn State more successful at defensive tackle? And, we've had that conversation a bunch of times here on the show to say, about the top rated guys specifically, maybe not the guys they've gotten, because we think, players they've acquired are quite talented. Are you more optimistic maybe they'll get one of those guys because there are so many targets on the board? Right.
I think they're doing a good job developing what they're getting. Zane Durant's a damn good defensive lineman. I get that he's not, has that size that, maybe will make him a top 20 pick or anything, but it's a hard position to recruit. I know we come back to kind of make excuses on that, but there are only so many guys to go around, and most of those freak athletes, to just go back to the drafts over the years, most of those guys that do make it to the pinnacle reside down south, and it's hard to pull those guys out of the South when you're going against the Georgias and the Alabamas, the LSUs of the world, all those kind of schools. I mean, those players do predominantly stick around those areas, but at the same time, when I'm looking forward, I think Damari Simeon is certainly the one to circle the most. Would you agree with that, Sean? As far as like a very good talent, but he doesn't really fit the mold. He's kind of more like a Zane Durant, right? Than as far as like a freak NFL kind of, length, size, strength, all those kind of things together. Keyshawn Stansel to me is still probably the most intriguing, athletic, what he brings, but I see him staying down south. So
he picked up a Clemson offer this weekend. I think that's going to be big.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think they're doing. Listen again.
So I
think Alex Haskell is incredibly underrated right now compared to the way people Penn State kind of speak of him. So I think he's going to end up being a heck of a player. Chukwu, we'll see. He certainly has potential there. I'd like to learn more about him athletically and stuff, and hopefully maybe we'll be able to do that one of these Penn State camps here in the coming months. But to me, let's not forget about Tavion Branch too. Remember, Tavion Branch is now being recruited as a defensive tackle. We'll see long term, where he's kind of stacks up. But I think they're doing fine. I certainly, if there's a position that you want a little bit more from as far as like game changers, I understand that, but it's not like they're not getting game changers off the edge. So that kind of makes up for it a bit.
Right. And I guess the point I was driving at is DeMar Simeon's a top 65 player. Titan Davis, I assume, is in the top 100, just based on his highlight film. The fact that both those guys are visiting, we've had years prior where Penn State's talking to these players, and in the spring, suddenly, somebody commits to Oklahoma State, or the pair of Florida defensive tackles that were on the same team last year. I apologize. The name is escaping me. Penn State was talking to both of those players in the spring. They were interested, and suddenly they don't even make official visits. The fact that they're getting top 100 defensive tackles to the official visit stage, that feels like progress, I guess, is how I was viewing this.
They've had a lot of that, though.
In my sense. Have they?
I feel like they've had a lot of talented guys.
Because the perception is not that they haven't had those guys, interested in Penn State. It's been a common question here in the chat and over at the site as well, that, they haven't been able to get those guys to that level of interest. And I guess if you guys disagree with that, that is I think an important thing for fans to realize too.
How have they been on the field?
Good, I would assume.
Cool. That means they're recruiting okay then, right? I mean, we get so caught up in the star portion of it, but yeah, I mean, a lot of it is geographical. A lot of those guys, those highly rated guys, at least, come from the Southeast, and the guys that Penn State's found, I mean, not all of them have hit, but that's the case with everyone at that position, because you're so big and so large, and sometimes you just overwhelm people. That maybe that's why you look so great. And then there's guys that are 240 pounds at one point and get to college and blow up. I mean, there's no scientific method for finding those guys. So as long as the play on the field is good, that's kind of what matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tight end has been conspicuously quiet in this cycle so far.
Well, that's what happens when you take 3 the year before, and one's a 5-star and the other 2 are like top 200 players. I mean, that's a massive part of it. Let's call it what it is, right? I think that is a big part of that. But go on, T. Frank. Sorry to cut you off.
No, I just keep going, because we're talking about Braden Vogel next, right? So that an important name, I think, in this particular conversation for 2025 or 2026.
Penn State will get a quality tight end this year. I'm not too concerned about it. I felt like they're in a pretty good spot with Peterson. Now, Braden Vogel, I got to learn more about. I've been trying to get in touch with him the last couple of days. He's been kind of quiet. Now his recruitment is kind of really seems to be taking off over the last 6 weeks. So I could see how things might be getting a little overwhelming for him. So I'm not surprised by that. But 6'3", 225 out of Mansfield, Ohio, Lexington High School. So Vogel visited one time before. It was last spring. And he wasn't no offer or anything. Obviously, the offer just came a week or 2 ago. I assume Hal went out to see him slightly before the offer. I would assume he went out to spring practice, those things. But
Hal went to see him, I think, on the Tuesday, and they offered on the Wednesday or Thursday. So
good info. Yeah. So aside from that, man, it's been tough. At source perspective, I've been working on it. Haven't got a whole lot. Obviously with Vogel, haven't got a whole lot. My next step actually today was to try and reach out to his coach and learn a little bit more about his interests. But the fact that he got an offer instead of an OV within a matter of days, I think shows the interest and speaks highly to what he's seeing from Penn State at that position. We know he's going to LSU this weekend for an official visit. Notre Dame will be a midweek unofficial visit, actually. That'll be June 3rd, 4th-ish kind of range. Then he goes to Georgia June 6th to 8th, and then Penn State June 13th. He does not have anything set for that final weekend. He has some sort of family event from what I understand. So, Penn State's actually going to get the last official visit here. Now, with all that said, I do need to learn more about Vogel and what Penn State thinks of him. But at the same time, it's been a pretty consistent message for months now that Max Sutter is the guy they really want, who is, of course, taking an official visit to Penn State. I think it's this weekend, right, Sean? I think it's this weekend.
Next weekend.
Next weekend.
June 6th.
Okay, next weekend. So, I would still kind of lead in that direction. And then, coming out of unofficial visits, it was certainly like Pierce Peterson, the player out of Minnesota. They felt really good about like their chances of being able to get him. So I still kind of feel like they're shooting high for Sutter and see where things go. And, at the end of the day, like people see new offers, right? And this is partly on me sometimes because we talk about, new offers are going out at this position late in the cycle. It must mean they're not trending well with other players. But the thing I'll also stress is that when new offers go out during, May, basically when coaches are out on the road, a lot of times it's just because they found a player who's too good to not potentially take. It's not necessarily that they're not trending well, with other players that they've offered. Like T-Ron Richardson, for example, another D tackle we didn't even talk about, got an offer the other day. He came and visited in the spring and was a player immediately people were speaking really highly of. I think they had to learn more about him and things like that. And, I assume, again, Barnes went and saw him and they see an athlete there that's too good to pass up more than they're not trending with Simeon or whomever it may be.
Yeah, I think to your point, Ryan, we're caught up in the plan A, plan B, plan C type stuff. And that's not really the case the way that the calendar is set up at this point. I mean, you're looking at guys that, Braden Vogel's going to end up probably top 200 tight end. Like those things are guys that you find. I mean, Kordovich wasn't on the radar this time last year. Matt Henderson was just on the, I guess he committed, I think in May last year. So you've got situations where you find guys that really can play here. No issue with that. But just the way that it goes, I think people latch on to the early offers and say, well, these are the primary targets and they will be the primary targets throughout the cycle. And that's just not the case.
Matt Henderson was a perfect example. That's a great example, Sean. That was a guy who really wasn't on the radar a whole lot, but Ty went and saw him play and got some, or evaluated him, got some accurate measurables in 40s and things like that, and boom, offered right away and accepted him right away. So I think that's the main thing to know about those May offers. And when we get down the road a little bit, new offers are going out and it's late in the cycle and there's 24 commits, right? And they gotta hone in on a position or two. Then you can look at it as far as, okay, maybe things aren't going well with player XYZ, whomever it may be.
Gotcha. So it's not all positive news in terms of players scheduling official visits with Penn State. A couple guys either not on the official visit schedule anymore or are adding teams that maybe Penn State fans didn't expect right away. So there's just two more names to talk about. We have Carter Gooden and Grayson McHugh Fitz. What's the situation with those two players?
Yeah, Carter Gooden's not going to come next weekend anymore. He was scheduled for the 6th. Penn State had him lined up as a defensive tackle. He has it lined up that he's going to play defensive end. And it seems like it's non-negotiable there. You look at the schools that he's going to officially visit, and it's just a very interesting development in that one, because I saw him at Under Armour over the weekend. He was playing edge. He looks like going to be an eventual interior guy. I mean, 6'4.5", 250, 260 pounds. And I think he's going to move in that direction when he gets into a college weight program. But you've got those guys sometimes. They just want to play on the edge, and Penn State's recruiting a different style of edge, recruiting a different type of edge. And I think there's kind of a mutual separation there. We'll see where he ends up. It's a fascinating one. He's originally from Canada. He's at Tabor School with Jeff Moore, and he's a really, really good prospect. It's just a matter of, I think there's some differing viewpoints as to what he sees himself as. And I don't have his official visit list in front of me right now, so I'll move on to Grayson McHugh, who picked up a Texas offer recently. Kyle Flood came in. I may remember that name from Rutgers. He came in and offered him, and it's interesting to me because you look at the offers that he got when he was, for lack of a better word, blowing up. Alabama came in, Ohio State came in, these big time schools come in, and he didn't set up official visits with them. But then Texas comes in, and all of a sudden, he's got an official visit set up. So this has long been seen as a Penn State Notre Dame battle, but Texas coming into the mix and actually getting a visit does, sort of raise an eyebrow there. I still think Penn State is in a position where they can certainly win this one. But it's a matter of going against some of the best programs in the country. And that's what you want on one hand. And the other hand is like, he's an in-state kid. You think you should get him. So next couple of weeks will be interesting with Grayson McHugh. He's a little bit behind the curve in terms of when things got started for him. So he's another guy that's just continuing on the ascent, and other programs taking notice as well.
To clean up that Fitz, Rutgers May 30th, June 2nd, Michigan State, Syracuse June 13th, and Boston College is June 20th for Carter Gooden. Those are the scheduled, at least on his profile over at On3. I don't know if any of those have changed recently with Penn State coming off, which is still, so we'll see if they add another one, if he adds another one on that particular weekend.
And he just got bumped on 24/7, and it was a big bump. And like I said, he's a good prospect. It was a big bump. So we'll see where he lands. And I think everybody from the outside looking at him just sees a potential defensive tackle, because I mean he's a big kid, and he can move really well, and that's what you want at that spot. He's 6'4", 255, I think it is. You can grow that guy into a heck of a 3-tech, but the guy's gonna want to do it. So I think Virginia slipped in there. as well. Michigan State, Virginia, Syracuse, North Carolina, Boston College. It's interesting to look at, and I know that not everybody sees it in this direction, but who would be the best group of defensive line, or who has been the best producer of defensive linemen out of that original group? Penn State would, I think, kind of take over that from all those schools.
Honorable mention to Boston College. They get they produce one or two guys that are kind of bust into that.
And you can go anywhere. You can go anywhere and develop. I mean, absolutely. I'm trying not to take shot at those schools, but you look at the development track of Penn State, and it's pretty wide gap, I would say, from a mass perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan, you're going to be.
I also just wonder a little bit how much Penn State's really pushing for him too, because I felt like the same with Marcus Almeida too. I felt like they were always interested in Carter Gooden and Marcus Almeida too, to some degree, but how hard were they pushing there? I just kind of heard mixed things.
We always heard that first tier of Simeon, Titan Davis, and Haskell, and then you get to that second tier, which similar to Brian Harris, who committed to Oklahoma a few weeks ago. I mean, just not as heavy on those guys, but still, you want big bodies that can move, and he's a big body that can move. So I think Penn State definitely would have taken him. It's just a matter of everything fitting in and him fitting into the process.
I think they have really good ties with Jeff Moore, and that played a part of it too.
Oh yeah, and who's his quarterback there too?
Right, that plays a part of it too. But I'm not trying to downplay Carter, but I think you got 2 D tackles already committed. Like, you got to aim high now. I think Witherington's probably ahead of him. I think a couple of guys, just from what I hear, are probably ahead of him. And then again, it's not that they wouldn't take him; they would. But when you're going to dig your heels in on the DN thing, how worth it is the fight? That's how I look at that.
Ryan Snyder always spinning it pro Penn State as usual.
No, it's not even about that. I'm just that's something I've heard for a while.
I'm just kidding. You're not Nate. Come on.
I'm not placing Penn State future bets. Anyway, go on.
Actually, we're coming back to you about this because you're going to be in Baltimore, the Under Armour camp, which, we've talked a little bit about the fact that a lot of guys are taking these official visits. So the focus might be more on 27, 28, the future for Penn State football recruiting, which also I think is going to be what Fitz and I are going to be doing on Sunday, watching those young prospects at camp as well. So who are you going to be looking at? Who are the players that you've confirmed are going to be at camp this weekend, or who are you interested in?
Well, the only player I've actually spoken with who's absolutely 100% going to be there is Khary Adams. Now, he's coming off a South Carolina official visit. So let's see, where he makes it. He's also got a little bit of hamstring injury, I think, from track. So I don't know how much he's going to be doing or running or whatever it may be, but he's supposed to be there. We'll see. But and Jazeel Hart is also on the list, by the way. But of course, Jazeel committed a week ago, and now is taking an official visit this weekend. So I'm not sure if he's going to make it down there for that. I don't even know why he would, honestly. But the main thing to know, or what I'm actually kind of excited. I think the 2027 and 2028 lists are pretty good, and so I always have this dynamic or dilemma, I guess you'd say, when we have this camp every year, because it's always right before official visits, and everybody wants to talk about the 2026s. That's what's in the news. That's going to carry things for 5, 6, 7 weeks. For me, though, what I've gotten out of these camps more so are getting to know the younger guys, because it's oftentimes one of my first opportunities to, face to face, put faces to names, basically, right? And the list looks really good, I think, from that perspective. You have Matthew Gregory, who just finished second in the state championship as far as the 100 meter goes. Ran a 10, I think it was a 10.52, really good time. I mean, Gabe Scott at Central Dauphin has always been a really good track guy, and he won again this year. I don't know exactly where he's going, but he's going to run track at a very high level. So don't certainly not a knock that you run a 10.52 and you finish second. I think Matthew Gregory is probably going to win 100 meter in this state for the next 2 years here moving forward. But moving forward after that, Miles McAfee's coming back. He was the MVP last year at this camp. There's a lot of guys. Joseph Buchanan, player I've been really high on for a long time at McDonough. I got to watch him last year when I went down to watch Finney and Exeter. I think Joseph Buchanan, I think we talked about this last week with you on 300. I've thought for a while that he's probably the next guy up at McDonough. Nick Abrams is certainly, look at the rankings and all those things, up there, but I always kind of felt like Penn State wasn't maybe quite as all in on Nick Abrams, where I do feel like Buck is a guy that they're gonna certainly be interested in. But plenty of others too. I think James Pace is a guy I've talked about a lot. He doesn't talk much. I was fortunate enough to get a little bit of a foot in the door with him early on down at DeMatha. He's taken off right now. He's got a bunch of SEC schools coming in and offer him. I think maybe Notre Dame was another one that recently offered. So I'm really excited to actually meet Pace for the first time. I think he's an exciting looking prospect, already a 4-star, on 300 kind of guy. Got Brandon Lockley at St. Joseph's Prep. He's been at Penn State a bunch of times. Good looking linebacker prospect. And then Khalil Rayner, Davion Brown's teammate down there at Trinity in Richmond. So the 2020s, and that was just me going through that list within 5 minutes. I could probably name off quite a few others when I'm able to sit down and kind of go through it a little bit closer. But 2028 too, just two guys, actually three guys I want to mention with 2028. Caleb Wellesley, Kenny Wellesley's younger brother. I got to learn more about how his season progressed and all those things, but that's certainly a tie there that should help Penn State. I got to, again, learn more, a little bit about his season and all that. But two guys I think Penn State's absolutely going to be very interested in are Keith Miller at Archbishop Spalding and Ryan Drakeford, who is transferring to McDonough and has already visited Penn State, now going to McDonough. I think that's going to be he's going to be a player we're talking about a good bit. So I'm expecting like 24 or so quality underclassmen that I think are going to very much be in the mix. Looking forward to watching those guys, getting to know some of them a little bit more and seeing how they do.
One last thing I want to come back to you with, Ryan. We don't need to get deep into this because we got to get to official visits, but I thought this was a really good article that fans would really enjoy reading. It's your what's left for Penn State at the offensive skill positions in the 2026 class. So you should go read that right now. Well, not right now, in about 10 minutes or so when we're done with the show. At bluewhiteillustrated.com, you can subscribe right now for $1 to go read that information. Here it is, the title and all that stuff, all the pretty stuff on the site for you to know exactly what you're looking for. So just broadly, what did you learn by doing this exercise, going through these skill positions? As we mentioned, and we focused the last probably 20 minutes or so on the D-line and the O-line, but there is a couple of spots here and there. It seems like, I guess, again, broadly, what did you learn by going through this?
I'm just trying to project what's coming. Okay. So we know there's 2 quarterbacks committed. They ain't taking 3. That's one confident thing I can say on this podcast today. Penn State's not taking 3 quarterbacks in this class. I think if one of them somehow did end up elsewhere, they'd probably just end up with one. They'd be happy. But it's just kind of that routine, right? Of like, okay, they got Messiah Mickens committed. What's the case with Brian Bonner? I saw Ryan ask a question earlier in the chat about wide receiver. I think if they end up with the 3 guys that they have, they're happy. No doubt in my mind right now, Messiah Hampton, Travis Johnson, those will continue to be the 2 that they're going to push the hardest for. We already discussed Messiah. I think that's basically done, which means circle Travis Johnson. He's going to be an important guy for them to try and push for down the stretch. Yeah, I think it's probably unlikely he ends up at Penn State. I just haven't heard enough juice there that makes me think something's in the works, or they're top 1, top 2, but we'll see. I don't want to totally poo-poo that. You got something to say, Sean, or no?
No.
Okay, Sean has something to say. Okay. Then there's a couple other guys too, right? Brian Williams just visited this past weekend. Hayden Moore has a visit coming up. So to answer your question, Ryan, I mean, there's not a ton that pops right now as far as them adding a receiver. I think Travis Johnson's going to be the guy they push hard for. And then, whether they get him or not, I would lean towards not at the moment. Then I think you see how other positions play out, where you stack up maybe later in the month. And then that's when you kind of maybe make a decision to push a little harder for a Hayden Moore or Brian Williams to try and add a 4th. But they're very happy with their 3 that they got right now, and I don't. They'll be very happy if that's all they get. Put it that way. And then just tight ends, right? We just kind of talked about it. That there's 4 tight ends. I expect them to take 1, and we'll see where that ship falls. So I'm doing the same thing with O-line, D-line today. When we get off of this, I'm going to work on that story a little bit. And then we'll do the same thing with linebackers and defensive backs tomorrow. So just trying to project how many spots I can see them left, who I think, are the most likely candidates at the moment. That's kind of the goal here as we head into that first big official visit weekend.
Well, you mentioned those 3 receivers. They're going to be here this weekend for the official visit. And we've spent a lot of time talking about the impact of these upcoming official visits. And they've got, 16 of their 17 commits coming this weekend?
No, all of them. We just didn't have Alex Haskell marked because, remember, he never.
No. Terry Wiggins is coming in a couple weeks. I'm glad you read my stuff.
Okay. No, I got to change off Terry Wiggins. Don't I have Terry Wiggins on there?
He's on there, yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Good.
Just a reminder, the visits tab
live editing on the show.
The visits tab is kind of up to date, but the most updated to date is the stuff that's on the board. Yeah. And that's by design.
So with that, let's start with the uncommitted players, because I think those are obviously what fans are most interested in. And we started the show, Ryan, saying maybe not immediately, but some of these guys that we're going to be talking about here might join Penn State later down the line. So Rodney Colton, Kosi Apala, 2 really good-looking linebackers, Marky Walbridge, Marlon Bright, 2 offensive linemen, Fitz, what stands out to you about that quartet of players coming to campus this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, two linebackers, two offensive linemen. So, like, I think that those guys are pretty high on the board, especially at one position that you really don't need anybody with the linebackers with two committed. But the offensive lineman, I think, is just the most fascinating part. You're going to have an opportunity to sort of set the table for what you're going to do the rest of the class. I mean, you're looking at probably 5, maybe 6 in this class if it's the right guys. So a guy like Marky Walbridge is quiet, but also is a guy that Penn State's been on for a really long time. I mean, you have an opportunity for these guys to come in and sort of have the right of first refusal, if that makes sense. Marlon Bright is a guy that Penn State has looked really good, or Penn State's looked really good with Marlon Bright for a long time there at DePaul Catholic, and it's kind of when you mock out the class, you say Marlon Bright really makes a lot of sense from a location standpoint, from a target standpoint, from an athletic standpoint, a build standpoint, just everything kind of points to Penn State here. He's supposed to be at Syracuse, I believe, right now, and then we'll see what happens with the rest of his visit schedule. As Ryan said, he's slated to announce July 5th, I believe it is.
Correct.
It might not get that far. I mean, you take a look at his schedule. He's already taken 3 official visits, including the Syracuse one. Will be at Penn State this weekend, and then I don't think there's anything on the schedule for June. So.
No,
it's sort of a why wait situation in my eyes, but I'm not the one making that decision. So
Roseby Labintus wanted to do that too, by the way.
How'd that play out? Yeah. How'd that play out at dinner one night with my wife? Yeah, it was great. But
the Senators game was
yeah, we love Greg Pickle.
Yeah,
I don't know if you mentioned that before. No, I mean you look at 2 guys coming in on the offensive line that make a ton of sense for Penn State.
I find that fascinating too. Watching these players. And one of the things that I was thinking about today is this is a very versatile class. We talk about Phil Trautwein wants guys that can play either position, guard or tackle. Usually they lean one way or the other. And everyone does. You have talents that are better one or the other. But this is really a class full of swing linemen. You look at Marlon Bright, Marky Walbridge. I think you can make an argument that Kevin Brown and Roseby Labintus could also be guards. So like it feels
is big, dude.
I understand he's big. Yeah, I understand he's big. I also think he could play guard. The makeup of this class, I think is just interesting. Ryan, the linebackers of this group, like what do you see here?
I think they want to get another athletic linebacker, an outside linebacker type that they trust in pass coverage. And Colton and Opala seem to be that mold. I think Opala is the guy they prefer to get. Dan Connor has worked pretty aggressively hard on that. He went down there twice throughout the spring evaluation, or we call it spring evaluation, the contact period. He's gone to see Opala as much as he possibly can. If you go back to the January contact period and all those things. And I think Opala has a lot of interest in Penn State from what I hear. Traveling has always been an issue for him and his family as far as unofficials and being able to just go wherever. I think if you look at his visit center, it's not a surprise that basically schools in Texas are the only place he's really been able to go to. So I think there's a lot of interest. And I think just from, again, what people say, I've only talked to Opala twice. I never really dig down on a ton of different details with him, but from what I hear, from what people source perspective say, a good player who fits Penn State's kind of mold, right? Cares about the things that Penn State fits, and that's always really important to them. So that'll be a key thing to watch. How does his family, see those things, see that fit, and then also, trust the idea of him going this far away. With all that said, Texas wants him too, and Texas is a big time, prominent program that will absolutely be a player in this one, and likely the favorite. So. Time will tell, but I think he is Dan Connor's guy. I mean, with Colton spoke very highly of his unofficial visit, which was, I believe, early April. I want to say. I don't really see him coming north personally. I don't get that vibe, but he's certainly a player that they're going to keep pushing for. Now he's also the same guy that didn't he leave Penn State off his top schools or something like that, Sean? Wasn't there like a graphic?
Yeah, he had like a top 11 or something, and then it's like, oh shit, I forgot one.
Oh, I forgot Penn State. Yeah, one of those ones. Now, guess who also did that? Davion Brown, who we talked about, who's now of course committed.
He's now committed to Penn State. Yeah.
Yeah. So We'll see. I try not to overthink that stuff too much, but I get a laugh out of that. So you see that a handful of times a year. But
I still think Davion got you good. I think he just went Josh Kendall on you and you didn't realize it. So
yeah, he got me. So we'll see. But again, both athletic linebackers, I do think they want to add, guys who can play well in space. Adding one more would be important.
I think it's more. I think it's more luxury than important, to be honest with you.
Agreed.
They love the guys that they've got. And you look at the linebackers that continue to come in for visits or scheduled for visits, they're out of region guys. So you're not as attached to those guys and you're probably taking a bigger swing. Okpala is a guy that you've been adamant that Penn State is, I think probably you would label it as there's more interest there than would make typical sense, for a Texas kid who Texas does want, then usually those guys go to Texas. I mean,
Penn State thinks they're second in this race. They do. Yeah, they think they're second.
There's a draw there. As someone in the chat mentioned, he wears number 11. There's probably a reason for that.
Micah Parsons also plays in Texas. So.
Yeah. So I mean, there are things that you could talk yourself into there. We're not going to do that because he's a Texas kid with a Texas offer that Texas wants, and that's
so not a Max Granville situation. Which I'm not trying to equate the players, but generally a player from Texas that ended up.
Yeah, and it certainly can happen. It's just the odds of it landing that direction are tough. And as Ryan mentioned, for a guy that's had a tough time visiting schools, his parents probably want to see him play.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now in the NIL world, they can also pay for that. So that's another part of that. But it's also a long flight. It's not like Penn State goes down to Texas or anywhere down there. All that.
Careful. So. We're not having runway conversations on today's show. We only have 4 minutes.
We didn't even talk about game time kickoffs, which I think are supposed to come out here soon enough. I was surprised.
Yeah, I was trying to play keep away on that one so we can talk about it next week.
Good call.
I know that's your thing, but it's deep into June into the off season.
Here's one last thing I'll throw. I'm very curious to see Sunday's camp. Might be a name or two, some 2026 guys I think they're interested in, but maybe not quite, 100% in on. But just keep an eye on Sunday's camp and then next Sunday too. Those first two camps, the last couple of years, have produced.
They've done it, yeah.
Yeah,
Peter Gonzalez was one a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
they brought in Armory Hills last year. Yeah.
So just
Braz Thomas was one. Yeah, absolutely.
You guys, Braz Thomas, that's a great example. You guys will be at that one. I'll of course be in Baltimore, but keep an eye on Sunday because I think there's a couple names where I'm working a little bit to confirm, double check on that. We've discussed as far as in the mix for 2026 guys, and we'll leave it at that for now. But I wouldn't be shocked if Penn State gets a commitment this weekend. I just don't know
if he's on the
here's how it
official
would play
list.
What's that?
You don't know if he's on the official visit list, is what you're saying. So
yes, that's
keep
fair.
an eye out for surprises, is what you're saying.
Keep an eye out for surprises. Here's what I would say. Marlon Bright makes a lot of sense. Just whether he waits or not, that's what's going to happen. Time will tell. Right. And then the other thing is Marky Walbridge makes a lot of sense from what I hear behind the scenes, but he doesn't talk. So I have no idea. Those would be my picks. And then a surprise. We'll leave it at that.
All right. Be on high alert is what I just heard, including, especially me. Make sure we're ready for any sort of commitment video coming up this weekend from Penn State football. So you have been warned. That's what's coming up. And of course, you can follow us along. We'll have some things on social media, but mostly at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com when we're out at Prospect Camp, looking at the class of 26 as these guys just outlined, but also 27, 28. Get the names you need to know. We're going to play I'm going to play the looks like game, which I love to do. Who looks like a football player amongst all the football players that are currently football players? Yeah, I'll be doing that. Fitz is going to have probably a more sophisticated way of doing it. But that's coming up this weekend. So make sure you subscribe to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and here on the YouTube channel so you don't miss anything. I'm Thomas Ryan Carr for Ryan Snyder and for Sean Fitz. We will talk to you next week.